Welcome to Western Confessions, Episode 1. Here, behind the mask, lies the freedom to speak truths that cannot be spoken in the light. In this first episode, you will hear 3 voices. From Chicago, from Tulsa, from Denver. Stories of betrayal, secrets, and heartbreak that cut deeper than a knife. These are not fairy tales. These are not rumors. These are confessions. So settle in. Listen closely. Because once you've heard these secrets, you may never look at the people around you the same way again. If you're new here, remember to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters. Every confession deserves to be heard. Let's begin.
Confession 1. My co-worker stole my life's work. From Jacob, Chicago, Illinois. Have you ever worked so hard for something, only to watch someone snatch it from your hands, while the world applauded them instead of you? My name is Jacob. I'm 28 from Chicago, and for the last 5 years I lived for one thing, proving myself. I wasn't born into privilege. No family name, no shortcuts. Just me, my laptop, and the hunger to build something that mattered. At my tech company, we were told one big project could change your life, promotions, bonuses, recognition. For me, that project was Nova, a software tool I designed after countless late nights fueled by black coffee and vending machine snacks. But I wasn't alone. Kevin, my colleague, my supposed friend, stood beside me. We brainstormed, we coded, we joked about who'd finally get the corner office. He slapped my back, called me brother, and promised loyalty. Loyalty, a word that would soon taste like ash. The day of the big presentation, I was nervous but proud. My slides were ready, my prototype flawless. I stepped into the boardroom, but something was off. The projector already glowed. Kevin was at the front, and on the screen was my work, my code, my diagrams, my months of sweat and sacrifice. I froze in the doorway, listening as he said words that were once mine, claimed ideas that had been born in my sleepless nights. He even cracked the same jokes I had practiced alone in the mirror. The room applauded. Executives nodded. My boss smiled at him like he was the golden child. And me, I was invisible, erased. Do you know the sound of your own dream being stolen? It's silence. It's your voice caught in your throat, while the world cheers for a thief. I confronted him later, cornered him in the parking lot, my voice shaking with rage. Do you know what he did? He laughed. He said, "Relax, man. It's just business. Besides, you'll get your turn." My turn? That was my turn. My chance, my everything. And it was gone. The company promoted him. My emails went unanswered. People avoided me, whispering that I was jealous. Within months, Kevin's name was on awards, while mine was in the shadows. I nearly quit, nearly gave up. But here I am confessing, because betrayal at work doesn't just steal your career. It steals your faith in people. From Jacob, 28, Chicago, Illinois. And this is my confession. So tell me, what hurts more, losing your hard work, or realizing your so-called friend was never a friend at all? Comment below. I want to hear your truth.
You just heard about the Confession 1. You won't believe what happened in Confession 3. Wait for it. Let's listen to Confession 2.
Confession 2. The teacher who stole my wife. From David, Denver, Colorado. Imagine trusting the one person you love most, only to find her laughter echoing in another man's classroom. Not a stranger, not a colleague, but the man I once called my mentor. My name is David. I'm 38. And for most of my adult life, I believed in order, discipline, and the quiet promise that marriage was a fortress you could build if both people worked hard enough. I met my wife, Emma, in a school corridor of all places. She was new to the district, auburn hair tied back neatly, carrying a stack of books, heavier than her small frame should have been able to manage. I was a history teacher then, the kind who loved chalk dust on my hands and the rustle of old maps being pulled. Down from the wall, Emma taught English. She believed in poetry, in Shakespeare sonnets read aloud as though each word was a prayer. We met between classrooms and over shared cafeteria coffee, and before long, the rhythm of our days wove together. We fell in love not in some cinematic rush, but in the steady way teachers fall, grading papers side by side, laughing at the absurdity of teenage dramas, swapping lesson plans until the lines between yours and mine blurred. Our wedding was small, a gathering of colleagues and family under a rented tent in my parents' backyard. She cried when she read her vows, voice trembling but steadying when I touched her hand. For years, I thought, we were proof that 2 ordinary people could make something extraordinary. Enter Mr. Harris to students. He was the teacher, the legend, mid-50s, silver hair, reputation as the man who could take the laziest kid and somehow pull genius out of them. He had mentored me during my first year. I owed him more than I could say. Classroom tricks, discipline strategies, even how to survive the bureaucratic nightmares. Harris had a way of speaking that made you believe he understood you better than you understood yourself. He became a friend of our marriage, too. Emma admired him. She said he reminded her of her father, patient, learned, the kind of man who carried wisdom like an old leather briefcase. We invited him to dinners, to birthdays, to the Sunday barbecues. At first I was grateful. What harm could there be in your mentor becoming family? I didn't know then that trust can be the sharpest knife. The signs were small. They always are. Emma's laughter, when Harris stopped by our classroom door, had a softness in it I didn't hear elsewhere. She stayed late after school, grading with him in the teacher's lounge, claiming it was just easier with company. When she came home, her eyes sometimes held a glow like she'd been carrying a secret conversation all the way back. One evening I dropped by school late to grab a forgotten stack of essays. The building was mostly dark, the kind of silence where your own footsteps echo too loudly. As I walked past the English wing, I heard it, not just conversation, but the tone. Emma's laugh, low and conspiratorial, Harris's voice, smooth, too close. I paused at the door. It wasn't locked. Through the small glass pane, I saw her leaning across his desk, the papers forgotten, her hand on his forearm, his head tilted toward hers as though every word she spoke was sacred. It wasn't an embrace, not yet. But intimacy has 1,000 shades, and this was painted in bold. I froze. My mind performed gymnastics. They're just colleagues. Maybe she's confiding something. Maybe I'm imagining. But the air in that room told another story. I left without opening the door, carrying the sound of their voices like a poison in my chest. At home, Emma was normal. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, laughed at a television show. But I couldn't stop replaying the angle of her body, the warmth in her smile. It was the way she used to look at me in those first years. The affair became undeniable one rainy Thursday. I stayed late for a parent meeting that ended earlier than expected. As I passed Harris's classroom, I caught them, not just hands brushing or eyes meeting, but her lips pressed to his, slow, certain. The betrayal was both ordinary and catastrophic. The man I admired, the wife I adored, entwined in a moment so casual it shattered me. They didn't see me. I didn't announce myself. I walked away with a numbness that felt like drowning. Confrontation came 2 days later. I couldn't hold the silence. Emma was folding laundry when I asked, plain and raw, "Are you in love with him?" Her hands stopped midair. She didn't deny. She didn't ask who. She only whispered, "David," like my name was both an apology and a wound. I wanted rage. I wanted shouting, plates smashed, tears streaming. What I got was worse, resignation. She told me she hadn't meant for it to happen, that Harris understood her, that he made her feel alive in a way my predictability didn't. Predictability, that was the word she used. The same predictability that built her a home, that paid bills, that carried her through years of safety and companionship. Predictability had become my sin. I confronted Harris too. In his office, he looked at me with the calm of a man who had already written the script. "You're a good teacher, David," he said. "But sometimes love doesn't follow rules." Love. He called it love, as if using that word justified trespassing into my marriage. I wanted to hit him. Instead, I left. Some betrayals are so large your body can't find a response big enough to hold them. The divorce followed months later. Emma chose him. I packed up the house we had built together, boxed the memories, and learned how empty rooms echo when laughter is gone. I still teach. I still stand in front of students and talk about revolutions, about history's great betrayals and triumphs. But when I speak about trust, about loyalty, my voice sometimes cracks in ways only I notice. So what hurts more? When your partner betrays you, or when the person you once admired is the one who helps them do it? What would you have done in my place?
Let's hear about Confessions 3.
Confession 3. My sister stole my husband. From Harris. Have you ever been betrayed by your own blood? Not a stranger, not an enemy, but the sister who shared your bed and your secrets. When I close my eyes, I can still see the kitchen light at 7 p.m. The way it pooled onto the old linoleum and made the crumbs along the edge of the counter glitter like tiny secrets. That kitchen was the center of everything for my family. Sunday suppers, spilled coffee in the mornings, late night casseroles after working the late shift. It's where my sister Caroline and I learned how to forgive each other for small cruelties when we were children, where we braided one another's hair for dances, and where she cried louder than anyone else when I married Michael. We grew up in a narrow house on a quiet street in Tulsa where the neighbors waved and the mailman knew both our names. It felt ordinary, which is to say it felt safe. By the time I was 26 and in a white dress with my mother's brooch pinned at my throat, Caroline held my bouquet, smiled with those two bright eyes, and promised me in front of everyone that she would always be there. She was my maid of honor. She kissed my husband's cheek the way sisters do, like she loved him like a brother. Michael had a laugh the way a clock has a tick. He was punctual, patient, a man of small kind habits, folded shirts on Sunday nights, black coffee without sugar, and a strange devotion to the local baseball team. He worked with his hands. He liked old cars and the serious music that played quietly. On the radio while he tinkered, he was not flashy. He was good. We built a life together on small rituals, the kind of life you can't see when you're young, but that grows into a quiet fortress. We invited Caroline into that, life like you invite a breeze into a warm room, with relief and gratitude. She fit. She attended birthdays and Thanksgiving, took my daughter to ballet when I had shifts and said things like, "She's got her mother's eyes," in that way that makes you feel whole. When she called Michael little brother over drinks, I thought it was affection. I never suspected it was a map for something else. I am not a woman prone to melodrama. I handled our house, my daughter, the two jobs I worked. I wasn't blind to people's faults. I just didn't look for them in the person I loved most. We all wear masks at dinner sometimes. Jokes. The right amount of social sweetness. But we don't imagine the mask as a second face. Not the people you love. Not your own sister. There were hints. A text here. A delayed response there. Caroline keeping her phone face down on the table while keeping an unusual silence when Michael walked into the room. Little things that could be explained away with an excuse. The same way a leak becomes a storm only if you leave it. For years I chose not to see, and perhaps that was my fatal mistake. The mind will smooth over fractures if it loves the roof too much. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of night where the wind comes down off the plains and makes the porch light shiver. Michael and I had argued earlier that week about money, nothing dramatic. He wanted to invest in a small engine for a project while I kept thinking of retirement savings and grocery lists. We said the mean things you say when you're tired, the clipped sentences that do not mean the end of things. We were not the kind of couple who dramatized fights. We patched them with coffee and the next day's routine. That night, I woke before dawn because the bed was colder on his side. At first I thought he had got up to take a call, then to the couch, then to go out. I pressed my palm to the empty pillow and felt the small, sinking panic of a woman who has learned how to tell the difference between a small absence and a small disaster. I called his name. The house answered back with the sound of its own pipes. The television in the living room was dark. I walked to the window and looked across the street through the ripples of the night. Caroline's porch light was on. That in itself is not a thing that should startle you. People leave lights on. But there was a slow familiarity in the sight that made my stomach turn. I knew the tilt of her lamp, the exact cushion on her recliner. It was the way she had smiled at the wedding and at my daughter's recital that came forward then, like film feeding through an old projector. Then something like a bird's instinct pulled me to the car. I didn't plan the steps. I only knew that to stall was to lose something I could not ever get back. My feet found the gravel. My coat did not keep the bone cold out. And I walked that small distance that suddenly felt like a long way. Her door was ajar. Perhaps I should have stopped. The rational part of my brain, the one that had typed half a dozen bills and washed 100 dishes, told me do not go in, but the heart is a stubborn animal, and it was already beating the path of doom. When I pushed the door wider, the light flooded me and the scene was simple and ordinary and impossible. There they were, Caroline with her hair loose and her hand tucked into Michael's shirt as if she had always been the one who belonged there. Michael's face was that of a man who has been surprised by a sudden pleasure, but also by the risk of being caught. For a heartbeat, my brain performed a marvelous cruelty. It believed it could step into the room and assert a normality that did not exist. "Linda," Caroline said, as if the word should have been a laugh or a greeting. "You shouldn't be out this late." My world narrowed until it was a throat and a mouth and a sound. I had never heard him make a silence. Michael did not stand up to meet me. He did not pull his hands out or call my name with a certain guilt. He looked small, not brave. That was something different. He looked ashamed like a child who had been caught. It is strange how humiliation can be gentler than rage. I remember the way the air tasted, like lemon and cigarette smoke, like some other life folding up neatly in the room around them. I remember the way my knees might have failed me if not for the cabinet edge. I gripped. "Linda," Michael said then quietly, "it's not what you think. How many times in a life are you handed words that mean everything and mean nothing at once? How many times do people replace the stab with a phrase and think that repairs the cut?" I asked him, "Why?" And the questions were a kind of domestic thunder. They trembled out into the room and did not get answers. Caroline's smile became sharper when she saw that I was raw. "You always were dramatic," she said. "He just needed someone to listen." It is hard to describe the way a betrayal reconfigures the house. Not only does the bed remain empty sometimes, you find that the photograph frames are twisted. The furniture seems placed with another intention, and the kitchen light no longer glows like a friend. The home that sheltered you has learned another geometry. I left that night with the sound of their voices, echoing behind me in the gravel, crunching under my shoes like a metronome, counting the seconds until my old life became memory. I sat in my car and felt for the first time not only the absence of the man I loved, but the absence of the sister who had been my anchor. It was a double eclipse. The world tells you that betrayal is a single moment you survive. You shrug and pick up the pieces. It's not true. Betrayal is an ongoing weather, a fog that does not lift. For months, the house hummed with a silence that had weight. People sent food and casseroles and said the right things. They called with the soft ritual of condolence, but the calls are like bandages. They cover blood, but they do not heal. I went to work. I paid bills. I made sure my daughter had breakfast. You do what you must because the world asks nothing less. There were confrontations. I confronted Caroline the next day with a voice that was a brittle thing. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do this?" She looked at me, not with the sister she once had been, but with a stranger who had rehearsed the next lines. "He wasn't happy, Linda," she told me so plainly. "You made him small. He needed someone who understood him. Do you hear how convenient that is? The one who harms tells you the reason is yours. Your failing, your coldness, your mistakes. It is the oldest trick. Blame the woman who loved too well." I thought of every time I had been impatient, every night I'd fallen asleep before washing the pots, every festival I had missed because I worked. They became ammunition in the mouths of the two people I had trusted. Michael moved out for a while. People picked sides in quiet ways. Neighbors, who once invited me to barbecues, now smiled only when Caroline was near. It felt as if I had offended some rule that I hadn't known existed. I became a study in quiet resentment. My daughter, bless her stubborn heart, became my reason. I sat with her homework and learned how to make her pancakes, because that small kindness held me stable. There were nights when the rage came in hot, focused spurts. I would consider smashing plates, calling him at work to scream, to demand something tangible in return. I did not. I had to think of the child with the chocolate-smeared cheeks and the neighbor who relied on me to bring the soup. Rage is a luxury. It burns the hand that holds it. When I looked at Caroline in public, she owned the posture of the wronged. She would smile with a righteous narrowness and speak of betrayal as if she herself was the betrayed. "He was unhappy," she'd say, folding herself into moral language that suited her. It is strange how people can rescript truth so it becomes palatable to them. Years pass and the initial heat of the wound cools to a scar that aches in certain weathers. Sometimes I dream that I am back in the kitchen and everything is as it was. I wake and the kitchen is there and the broom is in the same place and life insists on its little practicalities. Then memory rushes at me with the sound of that laugh and the quietness of his silence, and the old alone feeling floods back. I learned many things. I learned how some people will hollow out the heart of another to feel full. I learned that love is not always faithful to itself. I learned that sometimes family is a convenient label hiding a predatory hunger. Most of all, I learned that surviving does not mean forgetting. It means carrying the story with you, learning to fold it into your days without letting it eclipse the small graces. If you ask me whether I hate them, it is a complicated thing. Hatred is hot and clean and unambiguous. What I live with is a grey thing. Disappointment, the ache of memory, and a cautious tenderness for the child who needs dinner, and a mother who is whole enough to provide it. I learned to laugh again in small ways, to accept evenings at the community centre, to make the pancakes my daughter likes, to go on walks past the park where the trees remind me that seasons change. Sometimes people will ask, why tell this now? Why bring the wound to light decades later? Because there is a strange power in naming. When you place the words in the open air, the story no longer can claw at you in the night. Speaking is not revenge. It's a kind of salvage. And if saying it helps another woman, who sits up in the dark and counts the hours waiting for sleep, then it has done something useful. I am Linda. I am 62 and still learning how to trust myself. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is my confession. What would you do if your own sister stole the person you loved? Would you fight, forgive, or walk away? Tell me your story in the comments. I read everyone.
You have now heard 3 confessions and 3 different kinds of betrayal. A stolen career, a sister's cruel secret, a wife's forbidden affair. Behind every smile, every handshake, every promise, there are shadows. And tonight some of those shadows have spoken. If one of these confessions shook you, do not stay silent. Leave your voice in the comments below. And if you don't like the voice of the narrators, you can identify in the comments. And if you wish to hear more, stay with us. And because this was only episode 1, here on Western Confessions, the mask listens for you. Until next time, remember this. The West is full of secrets, and secrets never stay buried.